The autumn wind carried dust through Redemption's main street, swirling around the makeshift platform where Silas Kane stood with his arms crossed. The auctioneer's voice grated against his ears, like sandpaper on raw wood. This wasn't a cattle auction. It was something far uglier. Indentured servants, they called them. Slaves by another name, sold to pay debts their families couldn't cover. Silas had no intention of participating in this travesty. He'd come to town for supplies, nothing more. But then he saw her, a small figure in a threadbare gray cloak, hood pulled so far forward it concealed her face completely. She stood motionless on the platform, hands bound before her, while men shouted bids like she was a mare up for sale. $5, someone called. $7, another countered. Before you continue with this story, I'd like to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It's really important to us and motivates us to bring you more quality content like this. I'd also love to know, where are you listening from today? Silas felt something twist in his gut when he noticed how her shoulders trembled. She hadn't made a sound since being brought out. Silent, they'd said. Mute from trauma or birth. No one knew. The auctioneer had presented this as a selling point. Won't talk back, won't complain. $10. A thick-set man with tobacco-stained teeth leered at the hooded figure. Need someone to warm my bed and scrub my floors. That did it. $500. Silas's voice cut through the crowd like a blade. The square fell silent. Heads turned. The auctioneer's gavel hung suspended in midair. You heard me, Silas said, stepping forward. 500, gold. He pulled the pouch from his belt, every cent he'd saved from 3 years of building his ranch from nothing. The auctioneer's eyes went wide as Silas emptied the coins onto the table with a heavy clink. Sold! The gavel came down before anyone could recover from their shock. Silas climbed the platform and approached the girl slowly, as he would a frightened colt. Up close, he could see the cloak was patched in a dozen places, and her wrists beneath the ropes were rubbed raw. His jaw tightened. I'm going to cut these, he said quietly, drawing his knife. I won't hurt you. She flinched at the blade's appearance, but held still as he sawed through the rope. The moment her hands were free, she clutched the cloak tighter around herself, keeping that hood firmly in place. Come on, Silas said. Let's get you somewhere safe. He led her to his horse, a big buckskin gelding named Dusty, and helped her into the saddle before mounting behind her. She sat rigid, not leaning back against him, though he could feel her shaking. Whether from cold or fear, he couldn't tell. The ride to his ranch took 2 hours. Silas didn't push for conversation, though he found himself wanting to know her story. Who was she? What had brought her to that auction block? The questions burned in his mind, but he kept them locked behind his teeth. His ranch, the Broken Spur, sat in a valley between 2 ridges of red rock. It wasn't much. A sturdy cabin, a barn, corrals for his horses and cattle. But it was his, built with his own hands and sweat. He dismounted first, then helped her down. She stumbled, clearly exhausted, and he caught her elbow to steady her. You're safe here, he said. I'm not going to, he struggled for the right words. You're not property, you understand? You're a person, and you'll be treated like one. She went very still. Then, slowly, she nodded. Good. He gestured toward the cabin. Let's get you inside. You must be starving. The cabin was simple but clean. One large room with a stone fireplace, a kitchen area, a bed in the corner, and a table with 2 chairs. Silas lit the fire and put coffee on to boil while she stood near the door, still hooded, still silent. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "Please." She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair like she expected it to disappear beneath her. Silas rummaged through his supplies and found bread, cheese, and dried venison. He placed it before her. "Eat. Take your time." For a long moment, she didn't move. Then her hands emerged from beneath the cloak, small, delicate hands with dirt under the nails, and reached for the bread. She ate quickly, hungrily, barely pausing to breathe. Silas turned away to give her privacy, busying himself with the coffee. When he turned back with 2 cups, she'd finished every crumb. "More?" he asked. She shook her head, then touched her throat and mouthed something he couldn't make out. "You can't speak?" he asked gently. She nodded, relief crossing what little he could see of her face beneath that hood. "That's all right. We'll figure out a way to communicate." He set the coffee before her. "For now, just rest." She wrapped her hands around the cup, absorbing its warmth. Silas sat across from her, studying what little he could see. Pale chin, slender neck marked with a fading bruise that made his blood boil. "Who hurt you?" The question came out rougher than he intended. She tensed, pulling the cloak tighter. "I'm sorry," Silas said quickly. "You don't have to tell me. Not now, not ever, if you don't want to." The fire crackled. Outside, a coyote called to the rising moon. "I have a proposition," Silas said after a while. "You can stay here, help with the ranch work, cooking, mending, garden work if you're up for it. In return, you get room, board, and protection. When you've decided where you want to go, or if you want to stay permanent, we'll work that out. But you're free to leave, anytime. This isn't servitude, it's employment, and you'll be paid fair wages. Understand?" She stared at him for a long moment. Then she nodded, but he saw tears slip from beneath that hood and track down her pale chin. "Hey," he said softly, "you're safe now. I promise you that." She wiped at her tears with her sleeve, then stood abruptly and moved toward the corner of the cabin where the bed sat. "That's yours," Silas said. "I'll sleep in the barn." She spun toward him, shaking her head frantically. "I'm not taking your bed while you sleep with the horses," he said firmly. "It's decided." She pointed at him, then at the bed, then at herself, then at the floor. A clear message. You take the bed, I'll sleep on the floor. "Neither of us is sleeping on the floor," Silas said. He grabbed blankets from a chest and started making a pallet by the fireplace. "I'll sleep here. Plenty warm, plenty comfortable. The bed's yours." She watched him work, then slowly approached the bed. She sat on its edge, testing it, as if she'd never seen anything so fine. Silas turned away when she finally lay down, still fully clothed, hood still in place. "Good night," he said quietly. No response, but he hadn't expected one. Silas lay down on his pallet and closed his eyes, though sleep was a long time coming. He just spent every cent he had on a girl whose face he hadn't even seen. His practical side said he was 10 kinds of fool. But the part of him that remembered his own sister, dead these 5 years from a fever, couldn't have walked away. Morning came with roosters crowing and soft light filtering through the windows. Silas woke to find the girl already up, stoking the fire and preparing coffee with supplies she'd found. She'd removed her cloak, revealing a simple gray dress that hung loose on her thin frame, but the hood remained. "Morning," Silas said, sitting up. She nodded and poured him coffee, her movements efficient and practiced. "Thank you." He accepted the cup. You didn't have to do this. She pointed at herself, then mimicked eating and sleeping, then gestured around the cabin. You gave me food and shelter. This is the least I can do. Fair enough, Silas said. After breakfast, I'll show you around. You can decide what you'd like to help with. They ate in companionable silence, eggs and bacon that she'd cooked perfectly. Silas found himself fascinated by her graceful movements, the way she anticipated needs before he voiced them. Outside, he showed her the garden plot that had gone to seed, the chicken coop that needed cleaning, the barn where 3 horses and a milk cow waited. She examined everything with sharp attention, nodding as he explained the daily rhythms of ranch life. When they returned to the cabin, she found paper and a pencil in his desk and wrote in careful script, "My name is Grace." Grace. Silas tried it out. It suits you. I'm Silas Kane, but you can call me Silas. She wrote again, "Why did you buy me?" The question was direct, probing. Silas considered his answer carefully. "Because no person should be sold like livestock," he said finally. "And because I saw how you were shaking on that platform. I couldn't leave you there. You spent everything." "I did." "Why?" "Because some things matter more than money." She studied him for a long moment, those eyes he still couldn't fully see, searching his face for deception. Then she wrote, "Thank you." "You're welcome." The days fell into a rhythm. Grace proved herself invaluable. The garden began producing again under her care. The cabin stayed cleaner than it had ever been, and her cooking was far better than Silas's rough attempts had ever been. But she never removed that hood, even when it must have been sweltering under the afternoon sun. Silas found himself increasingly curious about what she was hiding. Scars? A birthmark? He caught glimpses sometimes, a fall of dark hair, the curve of a cheek, but never enough to piece together a full picture. 2 weeks after her arrival, Silas decided to teach her to ride. "You need to know how to handle a horse," he explained, "in case of emergency." She looked terrified when he brought out his gentlest mare, a sweet-natured bay named Clover. "Go slow," he said, showing her how to approach the horse, how to run her hand along Clover's neck. "She won't hurt you. Horses are more afraid of us than we are of them, most times." Grace's hands trembled as she stroked Clover's soft nose. The mare nickered and leaned into her touch, and Grace's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Good," Silas encouraged. "Now, let's get you in the saddle." He helped her mount, his hands careful on her waist. Even through the fabric of her dress and that ever-present cloak, he could feel how slight she was. She needed feeding up, needed care. "I'll lead her around the corral," Silas said. "Just relax and feel how she moves." They spent an hour working with the horse. Grace was a natural, her body instinctively finding the rhythm of Clover's gait. When Silas finally helped her down, she was smiling. He couldn't see her mouth, but he saw it in her eyes. "You did well," he said. She touched his arm briefly, a gesture of gratitude, and his skin burned where her fingers had pressed. That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains. Thunder shook the cabin's foundation, and lightning split the sky in jagged white forks. Silas woke to find Grace standing at the window, trembling violently. "Grace?" He approached slowly. "You all right?" She shook her head, arms wrapped around herself. "Storm scare you?" A nod. "Come here." He gestured to his pallet by the fire. "Sit with me. Warmth helps." She hesitated, then sat beside him on the floor, leaving careful distance between them. Silas poked up the fire and wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "Want to tell me why storms frighten you?" He asked quietly. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she picked up the pencil and paper she now carried everywhere and wrote, "He locked me in the cellar during storms, said I deserved the darkness." Silas's hands clenched into fists. "Who? My father. Where is he now?" "Dead. The debt collectors came after. They sold me to pay what he owed." "I'm sorry," Silas said, and meant it. "No child deserves that. No person deserves that." Grace leaned slightly toward him, just an inch, but it felt monumental. Outside, thunder rolled like artillery fire. "Nothing's going to hurt you here," Silas said. "I promise you that, Grace. You're under my protection now." She wrote, "Why do you care?" "Because I see a woman worth saving," he said simply. "Because everyone deserves kindness. And because—" He stopped, not sure he should continue. "Because? Because you remind me of someone I failed to protect once." "We're sister?" He jerked his head up. "How did you know?" "You talk in your sleep sometimes. You call for her." "Sarah," Silas said softly. "She was younger than me by 5 years. Sweetest soul you ever met. She caught fever one winter, and I couldn't save her. Couldn't afford the medicine. Couldn't get the doctor there fast enough. She died calling my name." Grace's hand found his in the darkness. Her fingers were small and cold, but her grip was firm. They sat that way through the storm, hands linked, fire burning low, thunder gradually fading. Silas felt something shift in his chest, some locked door beginning to open. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Grace made breakfast as usual, but there was a new ease in how she moved around him, a comfort that hadn't been there before. That afternoon, while Silas was repairing a fence, 3 riders appeared on the ridge. His hand went instinctively to the rifle he kept nearby. "Stay behind me," he told Grace, who'd been helping him with the work. The riders descended, rough men with hard eyes and harder intentions written in every line of their bodies. The leader was a bull of a man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Heard you bought yourself an indentured girl," the man said without preamble. "Name's Cutter. I'm here to buy her contract." "She's not for sale," Silas said evenly. "Everything's for sale at the right price." Cutter's eyes found Grace and lingered in a way that made Silas's trigger finger itch. "I'll give you 600. That's profit for you." "Not interested." "700. She's not property," Silas said, each word bitten off clean. "She's a person, and she stays here of her own free will." Cutter's smile was ugly. "That's so? Girl, you want to come with me instead? I'll treat you real nice." Grace pressed closer to Silas's back, her hand fisting in his shirt. "You have your answer," Silas said. "Now get off my land." "This ain't over," Cutter said, but he wheeled his horse around. His companions followed, throwing dark looks over their shoulders. When they were gone, Silas turned to Grace. She was pale, shaking again. "You know him?" he asked. She nodded and wrote, "He's why my father sold me. Father owed him money. Cutter said he'd take me instead. Father refused. Cutter killed him. Then the debt collectors came." Jesus. Silas's blood ran cold. "He'll come back." Grace nodded miserably. "Then we'll be ready." Silas took her shoulders gently. "I won't let him take you. Do you trust me?" She looked up at him, or where his face would be if she could see it properly under that damned hood. Then she nodded. "Good. Come on. I'm teaching you to shoot." He brought out his spare rifle and spent the afternoon showing her how to load, aim, and fire. She was awkward at first, flinching at the recoil, but she was determined. By sunset, she could hit a bottle at 20 yards. "You're a natural," Silas said, genuinely impressed. She wrote, "I won't let him hurt you." "I'm more worried about him hurting you." Together, she wrote firmly. We face him together. Something warm bloomed in Silas's chest. Together. He agreed. That night, they barricaded the door and took turns keeping watch. Silas found himself studying Grace in the firelight, wondering again what she was hiding beneath that hood. Did it matter? She was brave, kind, hard-working. The rest was just details. Can I ask you something? Then, seeing him, she reached out her hand and pushed back her hood. Silas froze when her hood fell off. She was beautiful. High cheekbones that fell in waves to her shoulders. High cheekbones that fell in waves to her shoulders. High cheekbones. 4. Dark hair that fell in waves to her shoulders. Full lips. But it was the right side of her face that caught his attention. A port wine birthmark spread from her temple to her jaw, dark purple against her pale skin. Grace, he breathed. She flinched, already reaching to pull the hood back up, but he caught her hand. Don't, he said. Don't hide. Tears spilled down her cheeks, both marked and unmarked sides. You're beautiful, Silas said, and meant it. Why would you think otherwise? She pulled her hand free and wrote furiously. My father called me cursed, said I was marked by the devil. People stare, children cry, men offer money for me because they think I'm desperate enough to accept anything. Your father was a fool and a bastard, Silas said bluntly. And those men are worse. This, he gestured carefully to her birthmark, not touching, but acknowledging. This is just part of you, no better or worse than freckles or a scar. It doesn't define you. You don't think I'm hideous? I think you're one of the strongest, most resilient people I've ever met. I think you've survived things that would break most folks, and I think, he stopped, uncertain. I think I'm falling in love with you. The words hung between them like a held breath. Grace stared at him. Her eyes, one fully visible now, dark brown and deep as wells, wide with shock. I know it's fast, Silas continued. I know you probably don't feel the same way, but I want you to know that you're safe here. You're wanted here, and I'll die before I hurt you or let anyone else hurt you. Grace set down her paper and pencil. Then she reached out and touched his face. The first time she'd voluntarily touched him beyond holding hands. Her fingers traced his jawline, his cheekbones, learning him by touch. Grace, he whispered. She leaned forward, and he met her halfway. Their lips touched softly, tentatively, a question more than a statement. She tasted like coffee and courage. When they broke apart, she was crying and smiling at the same time. She wrote, I was afraid to hope. Hope, Silas said firmly. Always hope. They sat together by the fire until dawn, hands linked, her hood discarded. In the morning light, Silas saw her clearly for the first time. Every curve and angle, every mark and blemish that made her uniquely herself. But their peace was short-lived. 3 days later, Cutter returned with a dozen men. Silas saw them coming from the ridge and had perhaps 10 minutes to prepare. He sent Grace to the loft with a rifle and extra ammunition. Don't come down unless I call you, he said. If things go bad, there's a horse saddled in the barn. Take her and ride to town. Find the sheriff. No, Grace said, the first word she'd spoken aloud. Her voice was rough with disuse, but clear. Together. Silas froze. You can talk? I can talk, she confirmed, and I'm not leaving you. Grace. Together. She kissed him hard and fast. Always together. There was no more time to argue. Silas positioned himself at the window while Grace climbed to the loft. His heart hammered against his ribs. Cutter rode up with his men spread out behind him. Kane, send out the girl and we'll leave peaceful. Go to hell, Silas shouted back. Have it your way. Cutter raised his hand, and his men drew their weapons. The first shot shattered the window beside Silas. He returned fire, dropping one of Cutter's men from his saddle. Grace's rifle cracked from above, and another man fell. For 20 minutes, the cabin was a fortress under siege. Bullets thudded into wooden walls, shattered glass, kicked up splinters. Silas took a round to his shoulder, but kept fighting. Grace's shooting was precise, protective. She'd become a warrior overnight. But they were outnumbered. Cutter's men were working their way closer, using the barn and outbuildings as cover. Silas was down to his last handful of bullets when he heard hoofbeats, many hoofbeats, coming fast from the east. The sheriff arrived with a posse of townsmen, drawn by the sound of gunfire. Cutter's men broke and ran, but the sheriff's group cut them off. Within minutes, it was over. Cutter himself took a bullet to the leg and went down cursing. Silas sagged against the wall, blood soaking through his shirt. Grace dropped down from the loft and ran to him. "Silas!" Her voice cracked. "You're hurt." "It hurts," he admitted, "but I'll live." "Let me see." She helped him remove his shirt, revealing the wound high on his shoulder. Messy, but not fatal. Her hands were steady as she cleaned and bandaged it, though tears ran down her face. "Don't cry," he said softly. "We're safe now. You could have died, but I didn't." He cupped her unmarked cheek with his good hand. "Thanks to you. You saved us. You saved me first." The sheriff came to take their statements. Cutter was arrested for murder, attempted murder, and half a dozen other charges. His men scattered or surrendered. By nightfall, the broken spur was theirs again, damaged but standing. That evening, as Grace cleaned the last of the blood from the cabin floor, Silas caught her hand. "Marry me," he said. She looked up, startled. "What? Marry me? Not because you owe me anything. Not because you need protection, but because I love you, and I think you love me, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. Silas, if you need time, I understand. If you want to go somewhere else first, see the world, I'll wait. But please, Grace, say you'll be mine and I'll be yours." She set down her rag and knelt beside him. "Yes," she said clearly. "Yes, I'll marry you." He kissed her then, deep and true, and felt her smile against his mouth. They were married a week later in the small church in Redemption. Grace wore a simple white dress the town seamstress had made, and she wore no hood. Her birthmark was visible for all to see, and she held her head high. Silas wore his best suit, his arms still in a sling, and couldn't take his eyes off his bride. "I love you," he said when the preacher pronounced them married. "I love you too," Grace replied, her voice growing stronger every day. "Always together." "Always together," he agreed. They returned to the broken spur and rebuilt what had been damaged. The ranch prospered under their joint care. Grace's garden became famous in the territory, and Silas's horses were in high demand. They adopted 2 children whose parents had died of cholera, a boy and a girl who needed love and got it in abundance. Years later, sitting on their porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and red, Grace leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Do you remember the auction?" she asked. "Every day," Silas said. "Best money I ever spent." She laughed. "Best prison I ever escaped." "You were never a prisoner here." "No," she agreed. "Here, I was free for the first time in my life." He turned her face toward his and kissed her, and she kissed him back. And the desert wind carried their love across the valley like a blessing. The winter of 1873 arrived with a vengeance. bringing snow that piled against the cabin walls and winds that howled like wounded animals. Grace stood at the window, one hand pressed against her swelling belly, watching Silas break ice on the water trough. 6 months married, and she still sometimes woke in the night, amazed that this life was real. "You shouldn't be on your feet so much," Silas said, stamping snow from his boots as he came inside. His breath steamed in the cold air before the fire's warmth claimed it. "I'm pregnant, not broken," Grace said with a smile. Her voice had grown fuller over the months, losing that rusty quality it had held when she first started speaking again. "The baby's not due for 3 more months." Still, Silas crossed to her and wrapped his arms around her from behind, his large hands covering hers on her belly. "You're carrying precious cargo." "Our cargo," she corrected, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Do you hope for a boy or girl?" "Healthy," he said simply. "That's all I hope for." A kick against Grace's ribs made her gasp. "Active, this one. Good." Silas pressed a kiss to her temple, right over her birthmark, something he did often, as if reminding her that every part of her was loved, means strong. They'd settled into married life with surprising ease. Silas had expanded the cabin over the summer, adding a second room for the baby and improving the kitchen. Grace had transformed the property with her gardens and careful management. The townspeople, initially curious about the woman with the marked face, had come to respect her quiet competence and Silas's fierce devotion. But not everyone had accepted their union. 3 days after the snow stopped, a carriage arrived, bearing a woman Grace had never seen before. Elegant in dark purple silk, blonde hair piled high, face sharp with disapproval. "That's Cordelia Marsh," Silas said quietly, his expression darkening. "My former intended." Grace's hand went protectively to her belly. "You were engaged?" 3 years ago, before I came west. She broke it off when I lost my family's money in a bad investment. Said she wouldn't marry a pauper." His jaw tightened. "I came out here to start fresh. Didn't think I'd see her again." Cordelia swept from the carriage like she owned the place, her driver helping her navigate the muddy yard. She knocked imperiously on the door. Silas opened it, Grace at his side. "Cordelia." "Silas." Her eyes swept over him, then landed on Grace with barely concealed disdain. "I heard you'd married. I had to see for myself if the rumors were true." "They're true," Silas said flatly. "Grace, this is Cordelia Marsh." "Cordelia, my wife, Grace Kane." "Charmed," Cordelia said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Her gaze lingered on Grace's birthmark, with the kind of fascinated revulsion some people couldn't hide. How unexpected. Grace felt the old shame trying to resurface, but she pushed it down. She was Mrs. Kane now, carrying her husband's child, standing in her own home. This woman had no power here. "What do you want?" Silas asked. "I've come to make amends," Cordelia said, though her smile was calculated. "My father died last month. He left me everything, including the money you once lost. I'm a wealthy woman now, Silas. I'm willing to overlook your current circumstances. We could start again." The audacity stole Grace's breath. Silas's hand found hers and squeezed. "I'm married," Silas said slowly, as if explaining to a child. "Happily married, to the woman I love." "Her?" Cordelia laughed, a brittle, cutting sound. "Silas, be reasonable. She's, well, look at her. You were always kind." "Get off my property," Silas said, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet Grace had learned to recognize. Now, you're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was ever thinking you were worth my time." He stepped forward, using his size to make his point. "My wife is worth 100 of you. She's brave, loyal, and kind. She sees me, really sees me, not just my bank account. Now leave before I have you removed." Cordelia's face flushed crimson. "You'll regret this." "I doubt that." She turned on her heel and stalked back to her carriage, but paused before entering. "The whole territory is laughing at you, you know. The fool who bought a marked whore at auction and made her his wife." Grace flinched, but Silas's hand tightened on hers. "Let them laugh," he called after Cordelia. "I've got everything I need right here." The carriage rolled away, and Silas shut the door firmly. He turned to Grace, who was blinking back tears. "Don't," he said gently, pulling her into his arms. "Don't let her poison get in." "They're laughing at us," Grace whispered. "Who cares? Grace, look at me." He tilted her chin up. "I don't care what they think. I care about you, about our baby, about the life we're building. That's all that matters. You could have had her, had wealth again. I have wealth." He pressed his hand to her belly. "I have you. I have this child. I have land that's mine, and work that means something. That's richer than any bank account." Grace kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love into it. When they broke apart, she was smiling. "You're a good man, Silas Kane." "I'm a lucky man," he corrected. But Cordelia's visit cast a shadow. In town the next week, Grace noticed the stares more acutely, heard the whispers that quieted when she passed. The baker's wife, who'd always been friendly, turned away when Grace entered. The feed store clerk served her with barely concealed contempt. She said nothing to Silas, not wanting to burden him. But he noticed her growing quietness, the way she flinched at every sideways look. "We don't need them," he said one evening. "If they can't see your worth, that's their blindness, not your failure." "I'm tired of fighting," Grace admitted. "Tired of proving myself. Sometimes I wish I could just be normal." "You are normal. You're human, which means flawed and beautiful and unique." He knelt before her chair and took her hands. "Grace, I fell in love with all of you, not despite your birthmark, but including it. It's part of your story, part of what made you strong enough to survive. Don't wish it away. I just want our child to have an easier life." "Our child will have love," Silas said firmly, "and that's the best gift we can give." Grace went into labor on a howling March night when the wind rattled the shutters and sleet pelted the windows. Silas rode through the storm to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Mrs. Chen, who delivered half the babies in the territory. "First babies take their time," Mrs. Chen said calmly, setting up her supplies. "You best settle in, Mr. Kane. It'll be a long night." It was. Grace labored through the dark hours, Silas at her side, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragements. The pain was immense, all-consuming, but she focused on his voice, his solid presence. "You can do this," he said when she was ready to give up. "You're the strongest person I know." "It hurts," she gasped. "I know. I'm sorry. I wish I could take it from you." "Next one, you carry it," she managed between contractions, and he laughed despite his fear. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink when their daughter finally entered the world. She came out wailing, furious at the cold and the light, her tiny fists pumping. "A girl," Mrs. Chen announced, placing the baby on Grace's chest. "Healthy lungs on this one." Grace stared down at the squirming, red-faced infant and felt her heart expand impossibly. "She's perfect. She's beautiful," Silas breathed, his voice thick with emotion. Just like her mother. The baby had dark hair like Grace and Silas's strong jaw. Her skin was unmarked, smooth and pink all over. Grace felt a complicated rush of relief and guilt at that observation. "What should we call her?" Silas asked. Grace thought of storms weathered, of hope found in darkness, of the dawn that always came. "Aurora," she said. "Like the dawn." "Aurora Kane," Silas tested it. "It's perfect." Mrs. Chen stayed 3 days, teaching Grace to nurse and care for the infant. Silas was attentive to the point of being ridiculous, checking on them every hour, refusing to let Grace lift anything heavier than the baby, cooking meals that were more enthusiastic than edible. "You need to sleep," Grace told him on the 4th night, watching him rock a fussy Aurora. "You're exhausted." "So are you." "I'm recovering from childbirth. What's your excuse?" He smiled tiredly. "I'm too busy being amazed to sleep. We made this, Grace. This perfect little person." Aurora chose that moment to spit up on his shirt. Grace laughed, deep and genuine, and Silas grinned. "Even covered in baby sick, I'm happy," he said. Life settled into a new rhythm. Aurora was a demanding baby, wanting to eat constantly and sleeping in short bursts. Grace was exhausted, but happier than she'd ever been. Silas proved himself a devoted father, walking the floor with Aurora when she was fussy, singing off-key lullabies that somehow worked. The townspeople's attitude shifted after Aurora's birth. Women who'd shunned Grace began stopping by with gifts. Blankets, tiny dresses, casseroles. They cooed over Aurora and gradually began seeing Grace as more than just the Mark woman. She was Aurora's mother, Silas's wife, a neighbor who needed help during this vulnerable time. "People aren't so bad once you give them a chance to be good," Mrs. Chen said wisely during one visit. "They just need time." Grace wanted to believe that, and mostly she did. But shadows from the past weren't finished with them yet. Aurora was 6 months old, a chubby, happy baby who'd just learned to roll over, when Grace answered a knock at the door and found herself face to face with a ghost. The woman on the porch was thin to the point of gauntness, her face weathered by sun and hardship. But Grace would have known those eyes anywhere. They were her own eyes, looking back at her. "Grace?" the woman whispered. "Is it really you?" "Mama?" Grace's voice broke on the word. You're dead. They said you died when I was 10. I know what they said." Her mother, Emily, her name was Emily, swayed on her feet. "Can I come in? Please?" Grace stepped back numbly, and Emily entered. She moved like someone who'd traveled a long way on very little food. Her eyes swept the cabin, the baby's cradle, the signs of comfort and prosperity, and filled with tears. "You did well for yourself," Emily said. "I'm so glad." "Where have you been?" The question came out harsh. 13 years, Mama. 13 years. I thought you were dead." "Your father told you that?" "He told me you died of fever, that I'd never see you again." Emily's face crumpled. "He lied, Grace, he lied. He sold me, just like he sold you, but earlier. I couldn't pay his debts after he gambled everything away, so he sold me to a mining camp up north. I've been trying to get free ever since, to find you." Grace's legs gave out. She sat heavily in a chair, her mind reeling. "He sold you. I'm so sorry, baby. I tried to fight, tried to get back to you, but he'd already told everyone I was dead. No one believed me when I said I had a daughter. And in the camps," Emily's voice dropped, You don't escape the camps easily. How did you find me? I heard about a woman with a birthmark who'd married a rancher near Redemption. Knew it had to be you. How many women have a mark like yours? Emily reached out tentatively. Can I touch you? I've dreamed of holding you again. Grace nodded, not trusting her voice. Emily's arms came around her, thinner than she remembered, but still her mother's arms, and Grace broke down sobbing. 13 years of grief and loss poured out. They were still holding each other when Silas came in from the barn, Aurora in his arms. He stopped short at the sight of the strange woman. Grace? He asked carefully. This is my mother, Grace managed through tears. She's alive, Silas. She's alive. Emily pulled back and studied Silas with a mother's critical eye. You're the man who married my daughter? I am, Silas said, approaching slowly. Silas Kane, and this is our daughter, Aurora. Emily's face transformed. I'm a grandmother? She looked at Aurora with wonder. Oh, she's beautiful. She has your eyes, Grace. Would you like to hold her? Grace asked. May I? Grace took Aurora from Silas and placed her in Emily's arms. The baby, usually suspicious of strangers, cooed happily. Emily laughed and cried at the same time. Thank you, she said to Silas. Thank you for taking care of my girl. She's easy to care for, Silas said gently. Mrs., just Emily, please. Emily, you look like you could use a meal and a rest. Please, stay as long as you need. Over dinner, which Emily ate like someone who hadn't seen decent food in months, the whole story came out. Emily described 13 years of servitude, of trying to escape and being dragged back, of finally being freed when the mining company went bankrupt. She'd spent the last 6 months searching for any trace of Grace. I thought I'd lost you forever, Emily said. When I heard about the auction, she couldn't finish. A good man bought me, Grace said, taking Silas's hand. The best man. Emily studied their joined hands. He loves you. I can see it. I do, Silas confirmed, more than anything. Then I can rest easy. Emily smiled tiredly. My girl is safe and loved. That's all a mother can ask. She stayed with them through the spring and into summer. Grace watched her mother slowly recover, filling out, color returning to her cheeks, the haunted look fading from her eyes. Emily helped with Aurora and the housework, insisted on teaching Grace recipes from her own mother, and slowly became part of their family. But peace never lasted long. In July, a man appeared at the ranch, a scarred, rough individual who claimed to be from the mining camp where Emily had been held. The company's gone under, he told Silas while Emily hid in the cabin. But there's still debts owed. That woman, Emily Carter, she owes $300 in back fees. Back fees for what? Silas demanded. For her keep all those years. Food, shelter, clothing. It all costs money. You enslaved her and now you want her to pay for the privilege? The man shrugged. Law's the law. Either she pays or she comes back with me to work it off. Over my dead body, Silas said. That can be arranged. Silas's hand went to his gun. Get off my property. Now, you'll be hearing from the magistrate, the man said, but he left. That night, Silas sat at the table with his account books spread before him, calculating. Grace stood behind him, reading over his shoulder. We have enough, she said quietly. Barely, but enough. That's our emergency fund, our savings. She's my mother, Silas. He turned to look at her. I know, I'm just making sure this is what you want. Once that money's gone, it'll take years to build back up. I want my mother free, Grace said firmly. I want her here with us, With Aurora. I want her to know the peace she deserves. Then that's what we'll do. He closed the books. Together. Always together, Grace agreed. They paid the debt the next week, every cent they'd saved over their marriage. The magistrate counted it out and stamped Emily's freedom papers with satisfaction. You're clear, he told Emily. No more debts, no more obligations. Emily wept as she held the papers, official proof that she was her own person again. Grace and Silas stood on either side of her, their own tears flowing. That night, sitting around the fire with Aurora asleep in her cradle, Emily spoke of her plans. I should find my own place, she said. I've imposed long enough. This is your place, Silas said, if you want it to be. We're building an addition onto the cabin anyway. We'll make you a proper room. Aurora needs her grandmother. You mean that? I wouldn't say it if I didn't. Emily looked at Grace, who nodded. Please stay, Mama. I've only just got you back. I'm not ready to let you go. Then I'll stay, Emily said, and I'll help with this ranch until my last breath. I owe you both everything. You owe us nothing, Grace said. Your family. That's what family does. They expanded the cabin over the next months, creating a comfortable room for Emily off the main living space. She proved invaluable, helping with Aurora, managing the household, freeing Grace and Silas to handle the harder ranch work. The 3 adults and 1 baby became a solid unit, working together to build something lasting. By winter, the ranch was thriving. They doubled their cattle herd, added more horses, and Grace's gardens had produced enough to sell surplus in town. Emily had started baking pies that became famous throughout the territory. They were building wealth again, slowly but surely. We did it, Grace said one evening, standing with Silas on the porch while Emily sang to Aurora inside. We actually did it. Did what? Built a life, a real life, with family and purpose and happiness. She leaned against him. Sometimes I still can't believe this is real. It's real. He kissed her temple. And it's ours. No one can take it from us. But fate had one more test in store. Aurora was taking her first steps, wobbling between Grace and Emily, with determined concentration, when riders appeared on the horizon, 5 of them, moving fast. Silas saw them from the barn and ran for the cabin. Grace, get inside, get the rifle. The joy of the moment evaporated. Grace scooped up Aurora, while Emily grabbed the rifle from its mount. They'd lived in peace so long that Grace had almost forgotten danger could still find them. But as the riders drew closer, Silas's tension eased. It's all right, he called. It's the sheriff. Sheriff Morrison dismounted with 4 deputies, his face grim. Kane, sorry to trouble you, but we need to talk. What's happened? Silas asked. Cordelia Marsh was found dead this morning, murdered in her hotel room. Grace felt the blood drain from her face. She stepped out onto the porch, Aurora on her hip. And you think we had something to do with it? There were witnesses who heard her threaten you months back, said she'd make you regret turning her down. Morrison looked uncomfortable. I don't think you did it, but I have to investigate. Can you tell me where you were last night? Here, Silas said. All of us. We haven't been to town in a week. Anyone who can verify that? Each other, Emily said, stepping forward. The 3 of us were here all evening. Dinner at 6, baby to bed at 7, we sat by the fire until 10. No one left. Morrison nodded, making notes. I believe you, but there's something else. He pulled a letter from his pocket. This was found in Cordelia's room. It's, well, you should read it. Silas took the letter and unfolded it. Grace watched his expression harden as he read. When he finished, He handed it to her silently. The letter was from Cordelia to her lawyer, written the day before her death. Mr. Stevens, I need you to investigate Silas Kane's marriage to that grotesque woman. There must be irregularities. Surely a woman who is sold at auction can't legally consent to marriage. Find me grounds to have it annulled. I want Kane free, and I want that creature gone. I'm prepared to pay whatever it costs. Grace's hands shook. Even in death, Cordelia was trying to destroy them. She was planning to challenge our marriage, Grace said numbly. She was planning a lot of things, Morrison said. We found other letters to politicians, judges, business associates. She was trying to build a case that you, Mrs. Kane, were mentally unfit and that your marriage was therefore invalid. She wanted you institutionalized. The horror of it crashed over Grace. Institutionalized. Locked away in an asylum, separated from Silas and Aurora. Declared insane simply because of her birthmark and her past. But she's dead, Silas said, so those plans died with her. Mostly, Morrison agreed. But her lawyer already filed some preliminary paperwork. There's showing to be a hearing. A hearing about what? Grace demanded. About whether your marriage is legal. About whether you were of sound mind when you consented to it. Morrison looked pained. I'm sorry, Mrs. Kane. I think it's garbage, but the law's the law. You'll need to appear before Judge Hawkins in 3 weeks. After the sheriff left, Grace sat at the table with her head in her hands. Silas paced like a caged animal. Emily held Aurora, who sensed the tension and whimpered. They can't do this, Silas said furiously. We're married, we have a child, we've built a life. They can do whatever they want, Grace said hollowly. I was property once. Maybe in their eyes, I still am. No. Silas knelt before her. You're my wife, Aurora's mother, a landowner and a citizen. We'll fight this. How? We're not rich. We don't have powerful friends. We have the truth. We have witnesses to our life together. We have proof that you're competent. The ranch accounts you keep, the business deals you've negotiated. He gripped her hands. Grace, we faced worse than this. We'll face this too. What if we lose? We won't. But what if? She looked at him with eyes full of fear. What if they take Aurora? What if they lock me away? I'll die before I let that happen, Silas said fiercely. Do you hear me? I will burn the world down before I let anyone take you from us. Emily spoke up quietly. There might be another way. They both turned to her. I was thinking, Emily continued. Grace wasn't a slave when you married her. She was a free woman working for wages. You have her employment contract, right? The one you drew up that first day? I do, Silas said. And you paid her those wages? Every month. Then she was employed, not enslaved. She was free to leave at any time, free to make her own choices. The marriage came after months of courtship between two free adults. Emily's eyes gleamed. What they're trying to claim is that Grace was property and couldn't consent. But you have proof she wasn't property. She was an employee with full rights. Hope flickered in Grace's chest. Would that work? We'd need a good lawyer, Silas said, and those don't come cheap. I have some money saved, Emily offered. From selling my pies. It's not much, but we'll use whatever we need, Silas said. This is more important than anything else. They hired Thomas Whitmore, a young lawyer from Denver, with a reputation for winning impossible cases. He was expensive, but he listened to their story with sharp attention and genuine sympathy. They're going to argue that trauma made you unfit to consent, Whitmore told Grace bluntly. That you were so damaged by your past that you couldn't make rational decisions. That's insulting, Grace said. It is, but we need to be prepared for them to bring up every detail of your past. Your father's abuse, the auction, your mutism. They'll try to paint you as mentally deficient. I'm not. I know that. The judge will know that once he talks to you. But we need witnesses who can testify to your competence. Whitmore made notes. Who knows you well? Who can speak to your character and intelligence? Over the next weeks, they built their case. Mrs. Chen testified that Grace had been a capable mother who'd followed complex medical instructions. The feed store owner admitted that Grace kept meticulous accounts and negotiated fair prices. Even some of the town women, who'd shunned Grace initially, came forward to describe her intelligence and capability. But the other side had witnesses too. Cordelia's friends testified that Grace was simple and childlike. A doctor who'd never examined Grace claimed that severe trauma often led to mental deficiency. The prosecution painted a picture of Silas as a predator who'd taken advantage of a damaged woman. Grace sat through it all, Silas's hand in hers, and forced herself not to cry. She'd faced worse. She'd survived worse. She would survive this too. On the final day of the hearing, Grace herself took the stand. Judge Hawkins was an older man with shrewd eyes. He studied Grace carefully as she settled into the witness chair. "Mrs. Kane," he said, "or should I call you Miss Carter? That's the question we're here to answer." "Mrs. Kane," Grace said clearly. "That's my name. That's who I am. Tell me about the day you married Mr. Kane." Grace took a breath and began. She described the months of living at the ranch, of learning to trust again, of falling in love slowly and carefully. She spoke of Silas's proposal, of her joy in accepting, of the conscious, deliberate choice she'd made to bind her life to his. "I wasn't coerced," she said firmly. "I wasn't confused or damaged or incompetent. I knew exactly what I was doing. I was choosing love, choosing family, choosing life." "But you'd been through significant trauma," the judge observed. "Your father's abuse, being sold at auction, losing your ability to speak. How can you claim that didn't affect your judgment?" "It did affect my judgment," Grace said. "It made me careful about who I trusted. It made me value genuine kindness. It made me recognize a good man when I found one." She looked at Silas. "My trauma didn't make me incompetent. It made me selective." The opposing lawyer stood. Miss Carter, isn't it true that you were completely dependent on Mr. Kane? That you had nowhere else to go, no other options?" "At first, yes," Grace admitted. "But Silas gave me wages. I saved money. After 3 months, I had enough to leave if I'd wanted to. I stayed because I chose to, or because you felt you had no choice." "I had every choice," Grace said, "and I chose him. I choose him. Every day, I choose this life, this family, this love. That's not dependence. That's commitment." Judge Hawkins called a recess. For 2 hours, Grace, Silas, Emily, and Whitmore sat in tense silence, waiting for the decision that would determine their future. When they were called back, the judge's face was unreadable. "I've considered all the evidence," he said, "and I've reached a conclusion. The question before me is whether Grace Carter was capable of consenting to marriage when she wed Silas Kane. The prosecution argues that her trauma rendered her mentally unfit. The defense argues that she was fully competent despite her difficult past." Grace held her breath. Having spoken to Mrs. Kane directly and heard testimony from numerous witnesses, I find the prosecution's argument without merit. Grace Kane is clearly intelligent, articulate, and capable. Her past trauma, while significant, does not render her incompetent. Furthermore, the evidence shows that she was employed, not enslaved, at the time of her marriage, and was free to make her own choices. Relief made Grace dizzy. Therefore, Judge Hawkins continued, I rule that the marriage between Grace Carter and Silas Kane is valid and legal. This case is dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Grace turned to Silas, who caught her in his arms and held her tight. Emily was crying. Whitmore was shaking their hands. They'd won. They'd actually won. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered, townspeople who'd followed the case. Some looked disappointed, but many were smiling. I'm glad for you, Mrs. Kane, the baker's wife said, approaching shyly. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Thank you, Grace said, meaning it. They rode home as a family. Grace, Silas, Emily, and Aurora, through the golden afternoon light. The broken spur waited for them, solid and real, a testament to everything they'd survived and built together. That night, after Aurora was asleep and Emily had retired to her room, Grace and Silas sat on the porch, watching the stars. We really won, Grace said wonderingly. We really did. Silas pulled her close. No more threats, no more challenges, just us. Just us, Grace agreed, and whatever comes next. What do you want to come next? She thought about it. More children, maybe. Growing the ranch, watching Aurora grow up, growing old with you. She smiled. Simple things, good things. Those sound perfect. They sat in comfortable silence, hands linked, hearts aligned. They'd weathered storms, both literal and metaphorical. They'd faced prejudice, poverty, and persecution. And they'd emerged stronger, their love tested and proven true. In the years to come, they would face more challenges, drought, disease, the normal struggles of life. But they would face them together, as they'd always done. The broken spur would prosper, become a landmark in the territory. Aurora would grow up strong and confident, free from the shame that had haunted her mother. They would add 2 more children to their family, a boy they named Thomas after their lawyer, and another girl they named Sarah after Silas's lost sister. But that night, sitting on the porch under infinite stars, Grace and Silas simply held each other and breathed. They'd fought for their right to love, and they'd won. Everything else was just details. I love you, Grace whispered. I love you too, Silas replied. Always together, she agreed. And beneath the vast western sky, that promise held firm and true, unbreakable as bedrock, eternal as the stars themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Silas and Grace's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.